Hey guys, welcome to another video of WrestleMania Week with Wrestling Man right here on YouTube. And this today is the final chapter, I guess you can say, of my four favorite WrestleManias of all time. WrestleMania 20, where it all begins again. I remember that day so well in my mind because March 14, 2004, I just remember it so easily. Earlier that day was the finals of the ACC Championship between Duke and Maryland. And this was a game that Maryland pretty much had to win. You know, well, if they won, they would have automatically been in the NCAA tournament. If they had lost, it would have been in the hands of the championship committee. Now, at this point in time, Maryland had been in the tournament 10 years in a row. So they'd been in the 3 seed, they'd been in the 2 seed, Duke's the number 1 seed in the conference tournament. And with like 5 minutes to go, it looked like Duke was going to win the game, was going to win the conference again. And then Maryland somehow manages to pull off this miraculous comeback, send the game into overtime, and eventually win the game in overtime to shock everybody and win the ACC championship. They are the only team from not from North Carolina who has won the ACC championship in like almost 2 decades. It's real shocking. But WrestleMania 20, was the event that I waited for all day. My sister Mandy was gonna, stay over here, spend the night, watch the event with me. And I really am trying to remember if this was I think this was a 5-hour event. Because it started at 7. I think it was going to go to midnight. And there's just so much good stuff I remember about this, whole event. You had The Rock coming back for what is, as of right now, his last match in wrestling. You had that. You had, what else? John Cena's first WrestleMania match. You had Chris Jericho and Christian go at it. And then you have 2 of the best title matches, you could have ever asked for a pay-per-view, especially at WrestleMania. First one, Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero, is a very good match, tells a very, very good story. And I absolutely love the ending. How can you not love the ending to that match? It's so genius. It was such a great ending, with Eddie coming out of his boot literally, and then the small package getting the 1, 2, 3, staying WWE champion. Now, I'll talk about the other title match in a minute. But there were some other cool highlights of this. The women's tag match. It was Tori Wilson and Sable against Jackie Gata and Stacy Keibler. And yes, they did wrestle in their bra and panties. But damn, these girls were actually wrestling. They were actually wrestling a match. There was one point where that whole sunset flip thing, reverse, back to a sunset flip, back to a reverse, back to a sunset flip, back to a reverse, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, And it was so good that the crowd in Madison Square Garden was applauding this. How many times are we going to see what would end, the WWE Divas get applauded for wrestling in Madison Square Garden, the mecca of all sports, And yes, there were a lot of pictures taken, but, the memory is the best picture to take. The Cruiserweight Invitational, saw a lot of guys there, and the infamous Ultimo Dragon entrance where he tripped up. Still feel bad for him to this day. Goldberg, Brock Lesnar with Stone Cold Steve Austin. The crowd was fantastic, and what I mean by fantastic, I mean they were just chanting all along, between Brock and Goldberg, and we knew this was, Brock's last match, and Goldberg was eventually going to leave, and you had Stone Cold Steve Austin in there at the same time. And it's not the best match ever, but it's so fun to watch, you know. It was absolutely fantastic. Then you also had the 2 four-corner tag team matches that happened. And those two, if you bought the videotape, or even if you didn't, those 2 matches, of all the matches that were put on the WrestleMania 20 videotape, the tag title matches are the only ones that did not make the final cut on the videotape. On the DVD, it's there, so you're perfectly fine. But on the videotape, those 2 matches did not make the cut. Women's title match, Victoria and Molly Holly. That was actually a fun match to watch, considering the stipulation. If Molly lost, she'd have her head shaved, and she did, you know, which I was surprised about because I didn't think Molly Holly would go through with that, but she did. And, you know, that's why I think a lot of wrestling fans really like Molly Holly and respect her just for doing that. And it was also the return of The Undertaker. His first match since November. He took on Kane. Not as good as the match at WrestleMania 14, which I talked about yesterday. But, you know, it was an Undertaker match. He was going to get the win, and he did. And I think he was 12-0 at that point. So, you know, he got that. And now this is where my personal WrestleMania story happens. Because this is at, and I think you guys are going to really like this story. So, Kane and The Undertaker had had just finished. I'm going to check my phone real quick. No, that's not part of the, story. But anyway, my sister says, I'm going to go to sleep. Enjoy the rest of the show. So she goes downstairs on this couch. Well, it might not have been this exact couch, but it was a couch. She went downstairs, went to sleep. The next match was the last match, the triple threat match, the World Heavyweight title, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Chris Benoit, for the belt. This is 11:15 maybe at this point. So, you know, I'm the only one that's up at this point. You know, my parents have gone to sleep. Both my sisters have gone to sleep. I'm the only one that's up. I'm a senior in high school. And I had a busy day the next day because, you know, I was volunteering in the afternoon working with kids. And that's eventually how I got my job. But, you know, so, you know, the match happens. And I'll be perfectly honest. I thought in no way was Benoit going to win the title. I thought either Triple H was going to stay champion or Shawn Michaels was going to win the belt. I didn't think in any way Benoit was going to win the belt. I thought the only reason, and this is, now remember, this is me as a 18-year-old, so this is back in 2004. At that time, I thought the only reason that Benoit was in the main event of WrestleMania was to just be in the main event of WrestleMania. Not because, you know, hey, he's going to win the belt, you know, it's going to happen tonight, you know, big spoilers. No, I just thought, you know, he was there for Michaels to win the belt back or Triple H to keep the belt. And what we see, to me, ends up being the greatest main event in WrestleMania history. I still believe to this day, 7 years after, that this match, or this main event, is the greatest main event in WrestleMania history. And Triple H made a good point in the True Story of WrestleMania DVD. You know, there are only 26 main events. Well, after Sunday there will be 27. But there are only 26 main events in WrestleMania history. And it's a very select few people that get to be in the main event, you know, of a WrestleMania. I mean, Michaels has done it before. Triple H has done it before. Benoit had not at the time. So we end up getting this unbelievable, fantastic match. I mean, I can remember so many of the spots. Michaels hitting the moonsault outside from the second rope on the Benoit and Triple H. Triple H and Michaels double suplexing Benoit on the Mexican or the Spanish announce table, and the table didn't break. Benoit with the crossface on Michaels, and Michaels is about to tap, and Triple H grabs his hand, and he's holding the hand, for him not to, to tap, and he gets to the ropes, and I think Triple H bled in this match. Benoit may have gotten some of Triple H's blood on his chest at the match, and then the ending. That ending is so fantastic. Triple H goes for the pedigree. Benoit reverses it into the crossface. Triple H is near the ropes. It's like he's gonna reach it. He's gonna reach it. And then he reverses it to try to get to a pin, only for Benoit to reverse it back to the crossface on the other side of the ring. So within a matter of seconds, they go from this end of the ring all the way to the other end of the ring. And then, and the crowd in Madison Square Garden, they're going bananas. It's like, is this going to actually happen? And Triple H taps out, wins the belt. And Madison Square Garden literally blew up. And being a fan, and I've seen pay-per-views that have been held at Madison Square Garden and footage of house shows and stuff. For wrestling, I've never heard a louder ovation for an individual winning a match, especially the main event of WrestleMania, than Chris Benoit on that night. And, and I'm in the living room, Benoit wins the title, and I wanted to yell so bad. I wanted to cheer, I wanted to celebrate. But I remember my sisters are asleep. My parents are asleep. If I yell and scream and start celebrating right now at midnight, I'm going to piss off a lot of people in this house and, and wake them up. And, so I didn't do that. And I'm glad in a way I didn't do that, because I probably would have regretted that to this day. But to see Benoit winning the belt at WrestleMania, and then the moment with Eddie and Chris at the end, and people can say, oh, it's a tainted moment now because Eddie died, and then Chris died, with the double murder suicide, and then Eddie's, enlarged heart, and to a degree, I can understand their case, and I respect that. But when you've been in the business as long as Eddie Guerrero had, and as long as Chris Benoit had, and to suffer the heartbreaks that those two men had suffered in their careers, to get to the point, to Madison Square Garden, to the main event of WrestleMania, the 20th WrestleMania, to celebrate the way they did in front of Madison Square Garden, and probably made fans cry. Probably made those fans cry that night. It's still a great moment. And when I did, about a year and a half ago, for the Sunset Flip Wrestling Show's YouTube page, my list of the top 10 moments of the top 10 wrestling moments of the decade, that was in the list. That was in that list. I think it was number 4, I want to say. I want to say that was number 4 on the list. But it was such a great moment because of the fact that, number 1, Benoit and Guerrero are not, the typical wrestler who's big and muscular and all that. 2, they've been just about everywhere. They've wrestled just about everywhere. And 3, and I think most important of all, it proved a point that you don't need to be a 6'7" guy, 300 pounds, to carry the company. And I mean, look at where we are today. Look at what's going to happen this Sunday at WrestleMania. The Miz is WWE Champion. Probably weighs 230 pounds. Not the tallest guy in the company. But yet, he's in one of the main matches at WrestleMania. Probably won't be the last match, but he's in one of the headlining matches of WrestleMania. And in a way, that night started this whole new trend in WWE where the smaller guys got their chance at, a title ring. Rey Mysterio, Edge, Miz. We take a look at these guys now, 7 years ago, I don't know if, we could say Mysterio would be World Heavyweight Champion twice. Or that Jeff Hardy would be champion. Or even CM Punk would be champion. But yet, they were. And I think this night, proved it. And WrestleMania 20 holds a very special place in my heart. It was such a fantastic event with, like, the storybook ending that, you couldn't book. You couldn't write an ending like that. You really couldn't. And, yes, Guerrero and Benoit are no longer with us, but they gave us one moment that, while WWE may try to erase forever, it will never be forgotten from the wrestling fans of the world. Alright, I hope you guys are enjoying this. Tomorrow is the new episode of Wrestling Man's Wrestling Show with the inductions of the 2011 Wrestling Man's Wrestling Show Hall of Fame. I'm going to tell you right now, the class that's going to be inducted tomorrow is going to be one very interesting class. So, hope you tune in tomorrow.